Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Russ, K5TUX, Cheryl, W5MOO, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 491 of Linux in the Ham Shack, the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. We thank you for being here. This will be our deep dive episode, so we're glad you joined us for this. And before we get going too far into our deep dive, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Cheryl is not with us tonight. She's W5MOO. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right, so we're going to do a deep dive that kind of expands on our random topic wheel topic from last time around, which was, is amateur radio noob friendly? And we gave the political answer of maybe. So now
it's a possible maybe, yeah.
It's a possible maybe, right. So what we're going to do now is give you some resources, I guess, or we're going to attempt to give you some resources that will help make it more noob friendly. If you're listening to this podcast and you're really new to the hobby, this will probably be most beneficial for you, but maybe there's something that comes along that you didn't think about or you haven't thought about in a long time or something along those lines. And, hopefully this helps out a little bit, maybe get more interest in the hobby, more information about the hobby, things along those lines. So I guess we'll just kind of roll right into it. And Bill was the one who was kind enough to write out our syllabus for tonight. So I guess we'll let you kick it off. And I will try and interject in like semi-informative ways as we go along.
Right. That sounds good. Okay. Nice. So we'll start at the beginning, as any noob should start out. And that's what we're talking about. Here's noobs, and that's licensing. Yes, that's the very first part. Some of you have, got your first license. Maybe that's a technician license, or maybe you sat for a few exams and got your general, whatever. But we want to help those that are maybe just got that very first license and maybe looking for study information or where we can get more information on licensing in general. And of course, some of the resources that we quickly come to mind when we put this together was, of course, the KB6NU study guides. The very first one, if you're unlicensed, the technician guide is a free download. You can download the PDF and read that to your heart's content. Dan has, I believe on YouTube, even the day crash course is up there on YouTube. So you can even do a course on YouTube with Dan, where he basically does the live study guide, which is really, really cool. And maybe if you just happen to pass your test for the first time and really don't have a good concept of the basics that were in the test, but you just happen to go and pass it, because there are people that do that. That would be a good guide to go back on and kind of look at the information and the supplemental information to those guides. Very good. And of course, the class online on YouTube would be a very good information. The other places you can find information on study guides and the question pools and the licensing and everything else, of course, is the ARRL. They have a huge list of publications, including question pool books, which is how I learned to pass the test, because I'm a question pool kind of guy. They also have an exam review application that you can check out. There's also probably dozens and dozens of ham study tests online. And this is where DuckDuckGo or Google is your big friend. You can actually just Google up, ham radio test exams or practice exams. And another place I found in that search was hamexam.org, which had flashcards, question pools, and practice exams for each test for licensing, which I thought was pretty useful. And Cheryl used a practice exam. Which one did she use? Do you remember?
She just actually used Dan's study guide, and I don't remember if she actually did a practice exam. I think she said she did, but I honestly don't remember which one.
Yeah, it was probably, again, you can find them linked all over the place. Generally, if you can score about 80% on the practice ones online pretty successfully, you can most likely pass your exams easy. So, that's the key. If you can pass the practice ones and you can get over the white coat syndrome of actually taking a test, getting to that next level is not much harder than actually just doing it and getting out there. So, I think licensing in general, I mean, most people come into the hobby either, as a noob, getting their very first license and they don't know what to do. And, there's always, get the next license. This is one of those options to go ahead and upgrade because, you'll run into, those people that are like, oh, you're only a technician. Oh, you need to be a general. Or, oh, you're only a general. You need to be an extra. And, there's always the option to go ahead and test for the next test. I mean, my son has been a ham for, I think 11 or 12 years and he's still a technician. So, and I haven't pressured him to get a new license. He's still a technician after all this time. And, it's fine to pressure people to get their upgraded license, but don't pressure them unless you're willing to help them get their license. And, having the right resources to do so, like the KB6NU study guides or the ARRL, question pool books or, your favorite ham test exam site. Those are great resources to really help others, in their licensing journey. So we can, make it more noob friendly for those technicians and generals that we wish to be all extras in the hobby.
I would say
anything more to add on that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would say that there is a lot of reason if you're getting into the hobby to become a general, not just sit as a technician, but not quite as much impetus to be extra. Once you get to general, you get a lot of privileges. You can experience most of what the hobby has to offer. And then you only really need that last step if you're just really going to get gung ho into it. And I did throw in one more resource, Amateur Logic's Ham College.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great resource.
So if you're getting into it, and that's a video resource because it's on YouTube and everything. So it's another good way to get Elmered and get licensed. So.
And again, these kind of get you involved into communities as well, because the Amateur Logic group is a community on top of that. So you can start to, meet some new people and in the hobby that are also on the same journey or have been on the same journey as you, which is always a good thing, because you always want to find like-minded people, and normally you can find them in the same place you are when you're looking for the same resources. So
you can also use social media platforms like Reddit and Mastodon and Twitter and all the others to communicate with amateur radio operators out of band. So that's another way to get good information, to keep in touch with people in the hobby, and to get more information to keep you involved, even if you're not specifically doing ham radio things at any given moment.
Right. That's more of the ending thing, the finding your community thing.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, I get where you're at. But we're just on licensing right now, so okay. let's move on.
Well, that can help you with getting licensed too, because you can ask people those questions, like what's the answer to question 114 in the question pool, and why?
But that's also like where you can find those trolls that we talked about. So you got to be careful about just blatantly going out somewhere and asking a question that could be resolved in the top 20 responses of a Google search. So there's that as well. And that's going to be part of finding your community, which we'll talk about towards the end. But the next section here after licensing is clubs, because clubs is kind of finding your community, but maybe not. And I kind of wanted to just touch briefly on finding a club that fits for you. So, and this kind of rides into our next topic, which is basically just activities that clubs generally are known for. So, the resource I pointed here is the ARRL's Find a Club. And why does Bill always talk about the ARRL? Oh, it's just so amazing. No, it's not really, but it does. The club finder on there does catalog all the clubs that have taken the effort to either become an ARRL affiliated club, which there are sort of, there's check boxes and stuff you have to do to actually get to that point. And they also have to provide information on exactly what they do and what they offer as a club and how they provide that service. So you can kind of at a glance look at clubs in your area that interest you based upon, anything. If it's in your area, that's one thing. The other way you can search for a club is by its activities. So let's just briefly go over the list of activities I just quickly listed here. Contesting. That's radio sport as well. Contesting, digital modes, DX, public service and emergency, repeaters, school or youth group, UHF, VHF, satellite, portable operations like SOTA and POTA, and RC, remote control, because that's part of the hobby as well. You can actually search by these keywords. So you say, oh yeah, I'm kind of interested in, in contesting. So you can actually just type in contesting in a keyword and search for clubs that do contesting. and the nice part about that is that normally I'm not going to say normally. That's probably bad to use. Contest groups are not always in a specific area. So like you might have a contest group, let's say in Montana here, there's not a contest group specifically in Billings, but we have a contest group in the state. So we have a club that is an ARRL affiliated club that does contesting that is encompassing the entire section or state of Montana. We meet online. It's kind of like an unclubbed club. And it's a group obviously surrounded a single activity that's important to the group. And it's, that's what interests me. So, if I were looking for a club that, did public service, it surely wouldn't be a club that only did contesting. So you do kind of get these indications, based upon the activities inside the club finder that tells you a little bit about that club. And, what I always do as a step further, depending upon what you're interested in. Let's say you're interested in contesting, because that's the only thing I'm interested in. And I only talk about contesting. You can actually take their club's call sign and see if they actually use it when they contest. And that's a nice litmus test to see if they actually use it for contesting. But you can find all kinds of stuff in there, and it's really nice. And I have been contacted by them because I am a president of a club as well. And, they do try to make sure that the entries are up to date. They're current. I believe an affiliated club every year has to report back, their membership. So they do keep track of the clubs actually being still there and still active. So you shouldn't run into many dead ends trying to find a club in that group, but don't be afraid to search for clubs that are not in your area. The pandemic, opened up, a lot of clubs to online members. Including, the Sussex Club over in, the UK, because they were doing, a lot of, content for their members on, building things and maker stuff. And, they were surprised that all of a sudden they were getting, quite a few, hams from the US attending their meetings. And that became a regular thing after, things kind of settled out because they found their community. They found what they were interested in a club. And I think those are kind of would fall under the other club list, is that, the things that interest you, you might find that they are not in your area, but yet you can still participate.
Did you want me to elaborate on that? Because I really have nothing to add. I mean,
I was just taking a breath.
Oh, okay, good.
I was like, I'm running out of air. I need to stop for a moment. And I was waiting for you to see if you wanted to fill something in there. But
I will say that with clubs in general, there are local clubs and there are regional and national and international clubs too. So you don't have to necessarily limit yourself. And I know you sort of touched on this, but you don't have to limit yourself to a local organization, because maybe the club in your area is not particularly noob friendly or something like that. But there are definitely clubs that support online activities or nationwide communication or international communication, or specialize in tech information, or global brotherhood and things like that. So you definitely want to check out any resource that might be available to you. And of course, the search engines on the internet are your friend to find these groups. They may not be 10 miles down the road, but you'll definitely find like-minded people to help you on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to reach out and look around and see what's out there, because there are a ton, and a lot of them do content on YouTube as well, which you can find. Everybody checks out YouTube once in a while, right? You can actually search it up and see for club meetings and stuff like that. You can find some interesting clubs that are doing things that engage the online community. Of course, there are sort of unclub clubs, which should be communities surrounding podcasts, YouTube channels, and whatnot. Again, that might be in your finding community area, but if you're looking for a club specifically, a good place to start in the U.S., of course, is that ARRL Club Finder. And then don't be afraid to search beyond the borders of the U.S. For a club that maybe is doing stuff that you want to do. Maybe you're doing maker stuff. Maybe you're doing RC stuff, and maybe there isn't an RC club even in the US that you're interested in, but there's an RC club over in the UK or in France or something like that does a lot of cool stuff and experimental stuff. Definitely look for that club. And almost all of them accept members from everywhere. So don't be afraid to reach out. So yeah, let's go on to like radios and stuff like that. I think a lot of people are intimidated by radios, and there's always the meme of the guy that, walks in with his Baofeng, which I'm holding in my hands right now, and says, can I talk around the world on this?
So we have to clarify that once upon a time, the answer to that question was no. The answer to that question is no longer no, but we're not going to get into the pros and cons and the trials and tribulations of whether talking on a Baofeng connected to the internet is amateur radio. But I was actually going to bring that up as a sort of trailing topic to the activities thing, because nowadays, even as a technician, you have that option, those digital communication options for communicating with other hams. And that is one way that hams and clubs often attract members and disseminate information, is using those technologies. So if you wanted to be a part of a club, an RC club in England, for example, and you live in Wisconsin, it's a lot easier as a entry-level ham these days than it used to be.
Oh, absolutely. With DMR, D-Star, Fusion, Wires X, and, IRLLP and all these other acronyms, and, even Echolink and stuff like that. There's ways to be connected across the borders with your simple little handy talkie, which I'm hitting my antenna on my microphone because it's so much fun. It's so much fun. The ways we can connect now with just UHF and VHF is pretty awesome, I think. It does get a little bit more convoluted, I think, when you get into digital handhelds, because you have various technologies, and there may or may not be a local repeater in which gets you onto that on-ramp to using that technology, whether that be DMR, D-Star, what have you. And in that case, you're kind of on your own to use a hotspot, which you use a hotspot, right? You have probably multiple hotspots.
I have 4 hotspots in the house.
So yeah, that hasn't stopped you from purchasing hotspots to get everything connected and interconnected and stuff like that. So I think even just getting into the basics of using a radio, which, here I am, I've been a ham for almost 30 years, and I have a Baofeng. So there's nothing wrong with owning a Baofeng. So I use it for emergency services and hiking. So that's my purpose for having that radio. And so digital radios, I don't know if those are for basic. What do you think? I mean, I mean, they can get you connected to stuff, but there is such a learning curve on using digital radios.
Well, there is on some digital radios. I would say that I would not introduce an entry-level ham to DMR right away. The big thing about DMR, it was not originally an amateur radio technology. It was a commercial technology that was translated to ham radio use. So it has a different paradigm. It has a different way of working that has been made to be used in amateur radio. And I think that's where the steep learning curve comes with that. But digital radio technologies that were made for ham radio are a little easier to get into. However, anytime you want to get into a radio that uses these technologies, the price automatically goes way up. So, so unless you're going to use your Baofeng with, a hotspot, presuming you can find a hotspot these days or a Raspberry Pi to build one on, you're still going to be outlaying $100 or $150 all in. And by that time, you're actually getting into the territory where you could buy a lower end digital ready handy talkie. So I don't know. I would love to steer people towards slightly more expensive radios, but I know that's not possible in every case for sure. So yes, there's no problem in owning a Baofeng. I own one too. Several.
You own several.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have 3 here at the house.
I even made a hotspot out of one. So.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where we were going to go down this radio road.
Not too complicated. No, okay. That's the thing. Yeah, I don't want to go. I mean, yeah, I would say if we have 3 categories here. You got the starter, intermediate, and advanced. And we know every starter ham starts with a handy talkie generally.
Generally, because that's the lowest price option. The other option might be a low priced or a used
mobile unit.
Yeah, for sure. And as long as you have a 12-volt power supply and maybe you could pick up a used mobile rig for $50, $100, something like that. I mean, the advantage to that is you get more power output. That might help you reach local repeaters and things like that. You lose something in portability. But oftentimes those are digital ready as well. So, it all depends on your use case, I suppose. But, that sort of lower end handy talkie and mobile is kind of where everybody starts. It's certainly where I started.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what was it? I actually had my first ham radio, VHF radio, would have been a mobile unit because I had one for Civil Air Patrol. And I think I had a handy talkie as well. I'm trying to remember what that was.
I'm pretty sure I had like an HTX 202 and maybe some really early mobile rig that I wouldn't even remember what it was, but
yeah, I had an Asden. I think 4,000 or 5,000. And then it got struck by lightning. And then I got a new Asden thanks to Allstate of Florida.
See, I got into the hobby to use it from CB radio. So the entry that I wanted to get into was using all those old CB radios that could be converted for 10 meters, like the Presidents and the Cobras and stuff like that. I never actually wound up with one of those. I went to a full blown ham radio when I actually bought one.
Yeah.
But that was the way I wanted to get into it. Never actually happened. So.
Yeah, my first HF rig was basically something that nobody wanted. So I got it for a steal. It was a Heathkit SB 104A, and it was a finicky little pain in the butt. But I eventually got it all working, and it was a fun experiment in getting old stuff to work. And I still have a soft spot in my heart for the SB 104 line just because I thought they were so sexy. And I really wanted that SB 230 amplifier. I really wanted that to go with it. But I never actually acquired one. My friend had one and we used it at field day and I tried to bribe him to get it, but then I didn't get it. But yeah, I started with that. And then I actually had the next rig I bought was the DX70TH, which you've borrowed.
Yes, I certainly have because it has 6 meters. Yeah.
It has 6 meters. Yeah. And I still have it and it still works. It was my first rig I was actually on the digital modes with. Yeah, and it takes the signal link into the microphone adapter. So if that tells you how incapable it is of digital radio, it worked fine. And you used it on 6 meters. And I think I gave you the cable and everything for the DX for the signal link. Did you ever use a signal link on it?
I did, yes.
Oh, okay.
I have my own signal links here, but I mean, I
gave
did
you the
use it
cable
that way.
stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
So it doesn't even require new equipment. I mean, some people would argue that, you need to have, some serious TXCO crystal oscillator to ensure that your frequency stability is so perfect and stuff like that. It's like, nah, not really.
I don't know. Half the people I see on HF are operating half off frequency anyway. So
I mean, if it works, it works. That's a nice part about ham radio is that, it's amazing how stuff that is not, cat controlled and all this other stuff doesn't have a USB port on the back. This stuff still works. There's no reason why you can't use it. And, I would still much rather have my SB104 up here on my table than the radios I have just cause it looks pretty.
Yeah, you absolutely do not have to go. I mean, unless you just got a pocket full of money that's burning a hole in it, you absolutely do not have to go to the top end out of the gate. And actually, there's something to be said for doing things like on the cheap with the low end and putting things together and making it work. You learn more that way rather than having a 9700 sitting in front of you that does everything for you and takes 6 weeks to read the instruction manual, that kind of thing. But
or flip through all the menus in a Yaesu radio, right?
It's
exactly. Which sub menu is this under the sub menu, and how did they abbreviate it?
Yeah, spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a rig that you'll never use the features of.
Yeah, I like the simplicity of the less knobs and stuff like that, the better. And if it just works with a few extra pushing of buttons, it makes it so much of a better experience in general.
Yeah, the first amateur radio HF rig that I ever owned was a Kenwood TS570D, which is a perfect entry level, easy to use, barefoot radio. And that is the radio I still have. I mean, I did buy one new one, but, I still use that 570 because even though the thing is, going to be pushing 25 years old now.
Yeah.
It still operates perfect every day that I want to use HF. So.
Yeah. So, you don't have to listen to your crazy friends or somebody that says, oh, you got to have the latest, greatest radio with all the bells and whistles and a waterfall and all the pretty graphics on the front and stuff like that. You don't need it. You really don't need it. I mean, if you're an advanced user, you might think you need it, but, in general, money is better spent on an antenna and a feed line than it is on your radio. Because you're going to get more bang for the buck out of your antenna, which is a great way to segue into antennas away from radios, because we don't really want to get into radios too much more. I think we've covered the gist of what you should look for a radio.
I think so too. I mean, just it takes so little to get into it, and honestly, the entry level doesn't make it bad. It just, I think you learn more, and I think you appreciate it more if you don't start off with the latest and greatest. So, but yes, I mean, where you get all your signal is through your antenna. The radio is probably like what 5% of the calculation when it comes to making contacts.
Yeah, you can buy a $6,000 flex radio and then shove it into a really poorly installed,
what's essentially a
built
dummy
antenna,
load.
and literally reduce it down to pennies. It's not worth anything because you just plugged it into something that is absolutely no way of performing in any way. And so we're talking about antennas. We did list some starter antennas here as a vertical and a J-pole, and those are going to be your VHF and UHF antennas, obviously by default. Most people think of those as their antenna. So like when you get your handy talk, you have the little rubber ducky, and, you can plug in an adapter and some feed line and actually use a mag mount, which gives you more range because the antenna is full size or larger size. Maybe it's a quarter wave, half wave, 5/8 wave or something like that, and can get your signal out a little bit further with the same amount of power. The same thing is, very true when you have an antenna at your house. A J-pole is another antenna. You can actually buy commercial J-poles, but there are many friendly designs of building your own J-pole. A lot of clubs build them as kind of like an entry level build your own antenna thing. I see that quite often, and a lot of people showing off their J-poles. I have an Arrow J-pole, which is a commercially built J-pole. And that's what I use for VHF and UHF when I decide to actually plug it in. So those are great starter antennas. For HF purposes, a good starter antenna would be a dipole. I actually almost throw an end-fed half wave into that starter antenna just because it's all banded. You can buy commercial versions of an end-fed half wave. And, it says it does 80 to 10 without a tuner, but, we all know better. You definitely want to have a tuner on that antenna. And then as you progress from there, everybody, you got to have a beam and you got to have this and you got to have that. And it really depends on what you want to do in the hobby and how far you want to communicate. And then, there'll be discussions, especially when you're in the VHF and UHF. Do you want to do weak signal stuff? Are you looking for long distance contacts on VHF and UHF? And this would be the non-FM variety, although some people do some FM skip or some tropospheric ducting with FM. I mean, a lot of people get involved in single sideband and CW, and as well the FT modes, the digital modes on VHF, UHF, SHF, and all that other HF things up high. And they're using directional antennas, multi-element to give you all that gain to make your signal go out further. Because as you add more elements, it bumps up the gain, both out and back. So you get more receptive signal and you get more transmit power effectively radiating from that antenna. You'll probably hear people say ERP, right? Effective radiating power.
Yep, you can spend a whole lot of time figuring that stuff out too.
Yeah, whole lots of maths, dealing with, coax losses, connector losses, and then you just have to add it all up. And then you're like, oh, where am I balance at? And I should I have bought, the bigger coax cable, for this run, because I didn't realize I was going to run my, UHF antenna, 200 foot from my shack, and then I bought RG8X to try to connect it to it, and I can't hear anything, and the repeater can't hear me now. Yeah, there are things like that, and there's legitimate maths that need to occur to make those kind of decisions successful. And as a beginner, you need to respect that. If you have a mentor or friends in your group or community that say, you can't put your antenna that far away from the house, or else you'll have to buy, hardline or something like that. They're probably not lying to you. Just because it's copper doesn't mean it's gonna keep your signal intact for that long a distance. With HF, it's much more forgiving. There's, the losses down in baseband are pretty marginal, unless you're really talking excessively long runs of coax and stuff like that. But, your antenna system includes everything from the back of your radio to the sky. So you need to always consider the coax, your connectors, and your actual antenna and the structure it's built on, if it's built on anything, or maybe it's a tree, hung in a tree or whatever. All of that is your antenna. So ensuring that you're getting the best signal out to your antenna does require some of those maths that, we had in that test that you had to take that maybe we just glossed over because we memorized all the answers. But it's definitely worth going back and looking at, what should the element length be? And should I be concerned about, my antennas and its proximity to metal objects? Oh, I have the steel building as my awesome ham radio shed, but maybe I shouldn't have an antenna sticking right next to it, because it's going to do some weird stuff and possibly get RF back into my shack. There's just so many ways we can go with antennas as well. So it's one of those topics that is a whole topic upon itself. But don't be afraid to look at more antenna setups than you consider buying. Because knowing the pitfalls and the actual, I don't know how to put that, right? Understanding what somebody else went through to get that to be installed is always kind of an interesting thing to me. is, I see a monster vertical or something like that. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. What did that take to get up in the air? I look for things that are easy to do. Cause like you might be in a community where you have lots of people that can help you build an antenna or put one up and stuff like that. But some people are out there on their own, right? This little noob guy that we're talking about here is, probably on his own and, thinking about putting up an antenna. And this has got to be something you can put up by yourself. So don't bite off more than you can chew. And, don't be afraid to try something smaller in order to just get something to try out and get on the air. I wouldn't be worried what it is. I've built all kinds of stuff. My side yard is full of half-built antennas and projects and stuff like that, I saw this in a magazine. I wanted to try it, and I just tried building it and stuff like that. And it's cool. You can do that. That's a nice part about, electronics, right? You just have to have a positive side and a negative side, and you just have to make electrically the right length. And then, Shazam, it'll actually radiate. It might not radiate well, but it will radiate. And I have a lot of those antennas that I have put on the air once, and that was it.
I haven't built too many antennas, but honestly, there's so many resources you can search for on the internet, and the art of putting together, decently radiating antennas out of essentially spare parts is something that's prolific. I mean, you can, even just having pieces of random wire around or a couple of lengths of copper tubing and some nuts and bolts. I mean, you can make an antenna out of almost anything. You don't have to go for the, $600 pre-made, multi-band vertical or whatever. You don't have to do anything like that. And size isn't necessarily an issue either. It's how well does it radiate on the frequencies that you want it to radiate on. And, just because you bought something expensive doesn't mean you know how to set it up right or that it's going to work effectively or anything like that. So, any avenue you can take to learning a little bit about antennas, doing a little bit of the math, and putting things together with your own two hands will certainly help as someone new to the hobby.
And don't be afraid to buy used either, except for trapped things. Be careful of traps.
They can
traps
fail.
are traps. Yes. So you need to inspect those, and I would have somebody, at least if you know who you're buying from and you know that it works, and they're just upgrading or whatever. But you do have to be suspect of some items just because they're be notorious for problems. And there are resources, again, you can check out that may or may not have valid comments in them. I'm thinking like eHam has a bunch of, reviews and stuff like that on random, ham radio things, including antennas and stuff like that. But like, if you sift through all the things, it's kind of like looking through the Amazon reviews. You toss out all the really like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. And you just toss those out, and you toss out the ones it exploded as soon as I plugged it in. Those are not good. The 1 stars and the 5 stars go, and you look at all the 2, 3, and 4s, and generally you can get a good feel for how something performs and even ages if it's something older. Like I run a Butternut HF9V here, that I bought used from someone for $200. But, we were just talking to somebody about it. I think maybe it was Jim. And it's like a $900 antenna now or something like that. And it's like, I wouldn't pay $900 for it, but maybe I would. I don't know. It's that antenna that keeps surprising me every time I did it. Like I just worked you on 3 bands right in a row. Boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
So it's like, it's so painless to use the antenna. But yeah, I bought it from a ham that, had actually 2 of them, and I should have bought both of them. So I could have spare parts. It was just basically changing out and doing a different thing with antennas. And, I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And I went there, I took it down so I could see how it comes down, and I could see how he had it installed. And I used basically exactly how he had it installed. I kind of set up the same setup in my backyard, and I put it back up the way it came down. And, I got that antenna, 10 years ago. So, I was pretty experienced with putting up antennas and stuff like that, but I look at it, I study it. I was like, I want to make sure I don't screw this up. Cause, some of these antennas are, kind of complex in their design and tuning and stuff like that. And when you get into more complex antennas, like this one's a complex one because it's 9 banded. So it's got a lot of pieces and coils and wires and everything else. And it's important that you understand, how that all sort of works. And, I think that's all part of understanding the antenna is not just going out and, I bought something out of a catalog. Is like, you should take a little extra time and really study exactly what you're getting into and understand how it works, how you install it, how you tune it, how you maintain it. Because, once you put up the antenna, it doesn't mean you ignore it until one day it dies. Some antennas you want to take down in the winter and do some maintenance on. Maybe, maybe those trap holes need to be sealed, so they don't get snow in them and stuff like that. Maybe the wind is blowing around and your drip edges are now on the top and on the bottom. So your drips are no longer dripping. They're just basically creating piles of ice and whatever. But yeah, you should understand that, it's something that does need to be maintained. It's not something that's going to just work magically forever. And then one day, okay, I just replace it. It's disposable. They're definitely not. They're definitely not, except for trapped antennas. No, just kidding.
You're dissing on my trapped antenna.
I know. I have traps that I've had forever too, but I have run into a few over the years that's like, why isn't this working? Oh, the trap's burned. It's had some arcs and sparks inside. You got to kind of investigate that stuff. Got to do a little MacGyvering to bring those back to life. But there's a million different antennas. Again, I think we've recommended in the past, get a book on antennas or at minimal get what's the big guide? I can never remember the big guide.
Isn't it just like the ARRL antenna book or something like that?
Well, the antenna book is the Bible for antennas. I consider it the Bible for antennas. But there's also the handbook. Yeah, the ARRL handbook, another ARRL product, that has an antenna section in it that is comprehensive and definitely fills you into those details so you can understand that, it does take a little bit more understanding and effort in antenna design and installation. All those items are important and they will make you look like less of a noob if you actually understand just a smidge of that information. So you can speak competently about your antenna setup, with someone that maybe is inquiring. Cause you never know. You got people that are interested. Oh, you got that antenna. Huh? How's that working for you? How hard was that to put up? And you can have these discussions. And then all of a sudden you're not the noob. You're the mentor. You're going to be mentoring them on their next antenna purchase.
Yeah, that's right. And getting into those conversations with other people is, a little like finding your community. And there's communities built around amateur radio antennas as well as every other aspect of the hobby too. Did you see how awesome that segue was?
That was awesome. I knew you were going to do that too. Yeah. So, the last part here that we want to kind of throw the bow around here and, send this your way is that, finding your community. Linux in the Ham Shack's a community. We have a community group that meets on Discord all the time and they talk all the time. And, once in a while they're here live when we don't record at really odd times. Your community could be anywhere. It could be on Discord. It could be on the radio. It could be down the street at the club. You never know. There's just so many places that you can find like-minded individuals. They might not always be in a random Reddit post, or an eHam review or comments on a QRZ forum posting. So don't be discouraged by the haters and the naysayers and the people that have nothing better to do than troll other people. There's a community that is right for you.
Yeah, I think like in most cases, those people are the vocal minority, but I think overall you're going to find like-minded people who are willing to help you learn, willing to teach, willing to be taught as well. And, you just ignore the vocal minority. I mean, they're out there. They try and get under your skin. They try to troll. They try to do all those evil things, but it's just as easy to ignore them. And usually if you do, they just kind of go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we always say just don't feed the trolls. So don't even bother responding. But, yeah. So yeah, if you're not finding your community, you can always come to us and we'll help you. we'll help you out because we have a pretty good group of people that hang out in our chat rooms and stuff like that. And they're definitely connected to other groups as well. So there's all kinds of people in various stages of the hobby, from non-amateurs to amateurs that have been in the hobby for a long time to some that have, only been licensed for a year or less. So, there's a community for you, and hopefully, with a little bit of help and information and mentoring and stuff like that, you'll be helping the next generation or the next group of newbies that come along in and help them on their way to finding their place in the community.
Absolutely. And I will stress again that if you're having trouble finding your community and you're listening to this and you're aware of our podcast, absolutely drop us a line and we will do our very best to point you in the right direction. We have over the last, 15 years built something of a community for ourselves, and we have the haters have all seemed to gone away, and we just have a bunch of nice people who are working on a lot of different projects, doing a lot of different interesting things in the hobby, some high profile people in the hobby as well. And everybody is attached to quite a few resources. So if you need some help, please let us know and we'll do what we can to point you in the right direction.
Cool. Well, that's all I have. I think that's perfect.
All right. That's all I got too. All right. So hopefully that was at least a little bit interesting, a little bit entertaining, and maybe even a little bit informative. That's what we try and do around here. So I appreciate you listening. But before we get out of here, we do have a couple of pieces of feedback we want to talk about. I'll do the first one and I'll let Bill handle the second one because I've already responded to Dan. So.
Oh, yeah.
I replied to him on Discord. I don't think he's seen it yet, but anyway, there was a YouTube comment. You're getting a lot of feedback on that YouTube video you did about building the distro with Cubic. And this is another response to that from the Gen X Gamer Guy, who says, great tool. Would love to have ZSH and a lot of other things installed by default. Also remove a lot of bloatware. Nice. We'll try after copy today. So it looks like he's going to try and build his own Ubuntu distro with Cubic. So that's cool.
Oh, nice.
He's not telling you to do that. I think he's saying he's going to do it. So.
Oh, good, because I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right?
Absolutely. So, but thanks for the feedback. We appreciate it. And thanks for checking out the video also. So, and then Dan KB6NU decided to respond to our episode about it was our short topics episode, the last one, where we talked a little bit about remote contesting or remote de-expeditions, and we each had some thoughts to say about that, and he responded to those. So, do you want to address that at all?
Yeah, sure. Just briefly, he had his original post was, "Is this the beginning of the end for CW DXing?" And of course, he excoriated us. No, just kidding. He didn't excoriate. But if that makes you go and check out the blog post, go check out the blog post. We love Dan. So, yeah, he did clarify his point a couple of places and definitely answered, even talked about the topic of Russ wanted to talk about, which was landing. When I asked Russ if he'd work a piece of machinery that we landed on an island with some batteries and Starlink and FT8, and you said you would not be too excited about that.
I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. I'm just saying I would not be.
Sure you would. Oh, it's rare DX. But yeah, there's something about it. So anyway, it's a fun topic. And yeah, we definitely need to get Dan on here just so we can just razz him a little bit just for fun, because it would just be cool. So we'll get him on here soon enough, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, some glorious random topic.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. It'd be nice to have somebody on the show. We haven't had anybody on the show, and maybe our year-end wrap-up would be a good place to bring him on, just to have his 5 minutes to to actually excoriate us.
Yes, we should definitely send him out an invite for that.
Yep, absolutely. And I just put a link to that into the show notes, his blog post. So that will be there for anybody who wants to follow up and read it. And I have been responding to Dan on Discord again. So if you're a Discord user, you join our Discord for sure. And you can see me talking to Dan, or you can talk to Dan too. Maybe you have thoughts about his thoughts on CW and remote de-expeditions and contesting and so on. All right, so we're down to new subscribers, supporters, and live participants, which there are very few of because these recordings came pretty close together. So it is what it is. So we've got nothing, except for a YouTube subscriber, Bob Smith. So that's as generic as it gets. Bob Smith joined us on YouTube.
Welcome, Bob.
Yes, welcome, Bob. There weren't any people even on Discord tonight because apparently everybody's in bed. So
yes, we're recording late on
a bit late.
Tuesday?
Yes,
It's a Monday. I don't even know what day of the week it is. I'm already messed up here. I got the whole week ahead of me, right?
Yeah, same here. Let's see what happens when they throw a holiday in. Everybody gets screwed up. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that does take us down to the end of the show. So thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. We hope we found this informative and at least a little bit entertaining. And with that, we'll go ahead and get on out of here and let you get on about the business of your day. And don't forget to tune in to the next episode, 492, which will be a short topics episode. And then we will have our year-end wrap-up and, weekender episode 493 before we go on break. It'll be our last two recordings, the next two of 2022. So please tune in for those. And in the meantime, have a great week, and we hope we'll catch you all very, very soon. This has been episode number 491 of Linux in the Ham Shack. For the On Assignment Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD 73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Our website is located at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast by visiting the LHS Patreon page at patreon.com/LHS Podcast or by using the contribute list on the homepage. We have a presence on Discord, Facebook, IRC, Twitter and YouTube. You can also drop us an email at info@lhspodcast.info or leave us a voicemail at 1-909-LHS-SHOW. That's 1-909-547-7469. Visit the online LHS merchandise store at shop.lhspodcast.info for fun and fashionable show-themed merchandise. Until next time, remember to always heed your hedonism.